Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 99 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Gavin. That is Fia. And Fia, we are down a host today.
We are down a host today, and it's for a good reason.
It sure is. So, our wonderful co-host Mike. Today, the day we're recording this, is his birthday. And he is a big Syracuse basketball fan. He went to Syracuse University. And for his birthday, somebody surprised him with tickets to tonight's Syracuse game. So I don't blame him. I also would have not come to record the podcast.
Yeah. It's an awesome birthday gift.
Absolutely. So Mike is taking a well-deserved day off.
Yep.
So it is the two of us today.
Yep.
And we were just sort of talking before we started recording. And I told Fia, I'm like, yeah, I'm a little bummed. She's like, oh, why? So I am a big nerd, if anybody wasn't aware. And I like to fix up old video game consoles, especially like stuff that I had when I was a kid, especially like handheld stuff. So I've been trying to spruce up my old Game Boy Advance from when I was a kid to just give it some more life, make it a little more usable in the year of our Lord 2022. And I done goofed. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I more or less broke it in a way that is going to take like 3 or 4 times as long to fix as I planned on spending with it. So there goes my week. So that happened.
But think about this, Gavin. If you do fix it, it'll just be even more rewarding because you put so much work into it.
You know, I sure do hope so.
I hope so too.
And I'm also potentially bummed because of potentially what happened yesterday at the time you're recording this. We record this on Mondays, so we don't actually know how Election Day went.
Yeah.
Signs point to likely not awesome for pro-climate folks, but we won't know that until we actually see the election results. So potentially not as worried, but likely probably kind of worried.
Yay.
But we're going to truck on with the podcast anyway. And since Mike is not here, we do not have a Today in History. But Fia, as per usual, has some housekeeping things at the beginning of the show.
A message for the people. Please don't forget to rate the show on whatever platform you listen to, and to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Give us feedback about the show or any future topics you would like to hear on the podcast. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, be sure to fill out our guest form, which can all be found in the show notes. One last thing, Gavin.
Yeah.
What will we be talking about next week?
Next week, for the grand episode 100.
100.
We're going to be talking about the history of paleontology, which we've touched on bits here and there, particularly early on in the history of the podcast. However, those episodes are really cringe, and I don't want to go back and listen to them. So we're going to be talking about the history of paleontology, particularly in ways that are not frequently addressed. When people think of paleontology or just science in general, we tend to think of what European folks started doing in the 17 and 1800s, not as much what happened before that in other places around the world. So we're going to be talking about that and all the fun things that go with that. So I'm really excited for that. I feel like that is a grand enough topic befitting episode 100.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, so if you have any questions or if you happen to know of a particular thing in the history of paleontology, feel free to send it through all of our various social media platforms that Fia was kind enough to tell us about just a second ago. And with that, Fia, what have you got for us today for Swamp Quarter?
Yes, so if you listened to last week's episode, we mentioned that we were going to do something. But it turns out we weren't going to do that. We're going to talk about turtles.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to explain that real quick. So this week's topic was supposed to be covering news that came out from last week's Society of Vertebrate Paleontology conference held in Ontario, Canada. However, it's hard to cover a conference that you're not at. And so I tried to, go through various social media channels. I do know a handful of people that were there that tried to give me some scoops, but there really wasn't enough without making this episode super, super technical, which nobody's going to enjoy but me. And also a lot of things, especially when it comes to conference talks and posters, because it's not published per se. If things are, published and vetted and peer reviewed, then it is, open to the public scrutiny and everything. But with these kinds of findings, they're usually pretty early in that process of getting published. And so a lot of scientists don't like to spread their data out into the world, because science, as open and transparent as it should be, is also a very competitive place.
Right.
And people don't want their data stolen. So,
Yeah.
Which I get, that's not me trying to give them shade or anything, but it does make it hard to make a podcast episode about it.
Yeah.
So, Fia, after we got done recording the last episode, Fia asked me a question about turtles, because we had mentioned just turtles offhandedly last episode. And she was like, that'd be a neat episode. And I was like, yeah, I'll keep that in my pocket in case, this episode didn't work out, and spoilers, it didn't. So here we are, turtles.
Here we are. So with Swamp Corner today, I decided to go along with the theme and talk about a very cool species, the diamondback terrapin, which is super cute, and definitely Google it if you get a chance. They like to live in brackish coastal tidal marshes, like where I work on the oyster reefs. They can be found all along the northeast and southern U.S. and also Bermuda.
Oh.
The name diamondback is given by their diamond patterns on the top of their shells. They are really cool because they can survive in both fresh and salt water by the use of their lacrimal salt glands. Sorry if I butchered it, but they use those when they're dehydrated. And from what I understood, it's kind of like a little pouch, but not too sure exactly how the mechanisms work.
Yeah, it's a complex sort of, because this is very common for non-fish that tend to live in saltwater a lot. That's why, like, when if you see a sea turtle up on the beach, it will look like it's like crying, because it's getting rid of salt water through its glands around its eyes. And penguins also do this kind of thing. And it basically is more or less just like a gland that they pass blood through, and it extracts salt from it, so it doesn't just hang out through the rest of their body.
Cool. But yeah, lastly, the diamondback terrapin is listed as an endangered species in Rhode Island, threatened in Massachusetts, and species of concern in Georgia, Delaware, Alabama, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Virginia. Because of a variety of things, but mostly a general gist is that they were overhunted to the point of almost extinction in the 1900s, coastal habitats decreasing, and climate change, sea level rise, all that crappy stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but
it is.
As we'll talk about, that is a pretty common theme with turtles.
Right. Mm-hmm. But the good news is, I did see last year, I saw a diamondback terrapin at LumCon where I work, laying eggs.
Oh, good.
In some gravel. And then I was like, oh boy, I need to tell somebody, because hopefully they can stay there. And it was in a part.
Yeah.
It was like at a part where nobody was going to disturb them, so they didn't have to like move them or anything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Fia.
What you got for us with the turtles?
Yeah, turts. So
turts.
The turtles, or as they are scientifically called, the order Testudines, which I think is very fun.
Yeah.
So it is a reptile order. However, as we've talked about, the kingdom, phylum, class, order, so on system is not as reliable as it should be, but we still use it because it's convenient. So there are 14 living families and around 360 living, or spoilers, recently extinct species. So give or take, in the last 500 years, there's been around 360 living species of turtles. And these range from pond turtles, your very typical like sliders, map turtles, to sea turtles, to tortoises, and all of these are turtles. It's sort of like the difference between like a frog and a toad,
Mm.
where it's just like a toad is just like a group of frogs,
Okay.
or I guess in the case of toads, several groups of frogs. So all of those, when I say turtles, I'm referring to all of these, unless I specifically will say tortoises, something something, sea turtles, something something.
Hmm.
So if I say turtles, I'm generally meaning all of them.
Gotcha.
In general, they live just about everywhere except for like the really really extreme places, like the poles, the driest parts of the Arabian Peninsula, and also the Australian outback, and some of the highest mountains like the Himalayas and the Andes, and also for some reason New Zealand, because New Zealand just likes to have no native large animals. Unfortunately, as also is usually the case with New Zealand and islands in general, some very prolific invasive species now live there,
Oh.
that we will circle back to in a little bit. But so there are turtles there now, but there aren't
Spoilers.
supposed to be. Yes. So turtles come in a wide variety of shapes, and it feels weird to describe like what a turtle is because they are so ubiquitous. You know,
Hmm.
like you know, dinosaurs and things. Are often referred to as like giant lizards, or even the word like saurus in a lot of dinosaur names means lizard if you
Hmm.
like translate it literally.
Yeah.
Um, but there's really not much you can confuse for a turtle. Turtles are so bizarre, and that is just a
Right.
central theme of their entire history. Is they are so strange.
They are very strange.
And among this strangeness, we get a large variety of shapes and sizes. So the largest turtles today are things like the leatherback sea turtle, which can get like 8 feet long and about 1,100 pounds. But they're in the water. They don't really count. Getting big in the ocean is not particularly hard.
Yeah, that's true.
On land, we have the Galapagos tortoise, which
Uh,
can get about 6 feet long and 8 to 900 pounds or so.
the Galapagos tortoise isn't extinct.
No, but it is real close.
Okay.
Not as close as it used to be. It is doing better,
Okay. That's good.
but it is a big, slow-moving thing that lives on islands, and we humans love to eat those. Um,
Ugh.
so if we had given it even probably another 50, 60 years without really, actively trying to conserve it, it probably would have.
Right.
So we go from those big giant ones all the way down to a handful of turtles uh, in the 4 inches, 6 ounces kind of size. So would very, very comfortably fit in the palm of your hand as a full grown adult.
Mm.
And again, it feels just strange describing what a turtle is, but I need to describe their features in order for you to really understand
Yeah.
how bizarre they are. So let's talk about all the weirdness, starting with their shell. So that's sort of the characteristic of turtles.
So weird. I've been trying to wrap my head around it since we've started, and I just can't
Yeah.
understand how you can have a shell that like you shed but is still always attached to your body.
I guess let me follow up there. What do you mean by shed?
Molt, like I guess flake off like dead skin.
Okay. So a very common thing that you see in like cartoons and things
Hmm.
is turtles being able to leave their shell behind.
Right.
You'll see it in the form of like a turtle like covering itself up because it is naked without its shell. Turtles cannot leave their shell.
No, no, they cannot.
So despite, I think Over the Hedge was a popular animated movie when I was in like middle school or so. And one of the characters is like this stuffy older turtle who at one point gets scared out of his shell. And that's especially like in like older cartoons and stuff. That's a very common thing to do with turtles, but
Right.
they cannot do that because the shell is made out of their rib cage.
What?
Yes.
That's a crazy
So
way to
think
think
of
about
your
it.
ribs, your ribs on your body. Feel where they are. So many reptiles have they're called gastralia, but many people sort of refer to them as belly ribs. So it is sort of a second set of ribs, mostly just on the belly, that goes down much farther on the body. Um, usually well past where our belly button is on you, for example. Um, Turtles take all of that and fuse the ribs all together,
Wow.
which presents many problems because that is a very strange thing to do.
Yeah.
So, other animals that have shells, things like armadillos, for example, they are only very loosely attached to their shell. Their shell is made out of individual bones within the skin.
Hmm.
So, if you have an armadillo skeleton, you can take the shell off of the skeleton and it will look like a fairly normal skeleton. Turtles, not at all the case. To get inside a turtle, you have to cut the shell apart.
Wow.
And so you're thinking to yourself, so if my ribs fuse together, it would basically just give you like a really good six pack, right? That's what's going through your mind. But then comes along all the side effects of doing that. Firstly, turtles walk kind of funny because not only have they turned their rib cage into a shell, they've brought their limb joints inside their rib cage.
What?
The shoulder joint on a turtle is inside the shell.
Okay.
So it would be like your shoulders and all of your shoulders, your shoulder blades, your collarbone, all of it inside the rib cage, which is why their front arms sort of poke out so weirdly from the front, is because their shoulder is inside their body.
So when you say inside, you mean like inside but separate, or inside and fused to the?
Inside but separate.
Okay.
Yeah. In some cases, I think there's like a couple of species of turtle that even sort of unfuse their pelvis from their shell, which that is a very strange thing because their shell also, being their ribs is also their backbone.
Yeah.
That's very strange because your pelvis is fused to your backbone. So it's
Yeah.
weird that turtles fuse the rest of their ribs, but unfuse that one for some reason.
Yeah.
So that is why
weird.
turtles walk kind of funny with their front limbs. So that is problem number one that turtles had to solve by getting a shell. Problem number two is that they can't breathe the way most other vertebrates do.
What do you mean?
So if you take a big deep breath in right now, just your rib cage expands. Mammals, there's a little bit of a caveat to that because we have a dedicated diaphragm muscle. So depending on how you breathe in, if you breathe in like puffing out your chest, that expands your ribs. Or because we have a diaphragm, if you breathe in and sort of expand your stomach area, that's because the diaphragm is pushing that down. We have a dedicated sheet of muscle that does that for us. That's a mammal thing. Other reptiles, so things like lizards, don't have a diaphragm, so they pretty much only have to breathe by expanding their rib cage to pull air in and then contracting it, squeezing it to push the air back out.
Wow.
If you don't have mobile ribs, you can't do that anymore. So turtles had to get creative, and you will not guess what they do.
I can guarantee you I will not.
So some things like frogs, for example, frogs have very, very reduced ribs. So they do, that's why you see like their throat sort of moving up and down a lot. That's how frogs breathe. Turtles do a bit of that, but not nearly as efficiently or as solely as frogs do, because frogs can also breathe through their skin, so they don't need it as much.
Mm-hmm.
But what turtles do
Oh
is
wait,
they yeah
do they breathe out of their butt?
we'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, yes and no.
I just remembered that fun fact.
Yes. So, but the main way turtles breathe
Mm-hmm.
is they have some muscles on some of their internal organs, like their liver and their stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And one set of muscles pulls the liver and the stomach toward the back of the body, which creates space for the lungs to expand, and that pulls in air. And then they have another muscle that pulls those organs back toward the front and pushes the air back out. So they use
Well,
their organs like a piston to move air in and out.
that doesn't really sound very efficient.
It's really not all that inefficient, particularly because turtles tend to have pretty low metabolisms, so they don't need
Okay.
as much.
Right.
So, yeah, again, very strange. Crocodilians can do some things like that, but not nearly to the extent that turtles can. And then also in here I have, side note, many aquatic turtles have blood vessels very close to the surface of the skin of their cloaca, which is their combined orifice for pooping, peeing, and reproduction.
Yes.
And because those blood vessels are very close to the surface of the skin, they can exchange gases across it while it is wet. That's the same way that frogs and other amphibians breathe through their skin. While underwater, many turtles can breathe through their butt.
That's awesome.
Yes. That is how many turtles, especially like pond turtles or things like snapping turtles, can stay underwater all winter.
Oh,
A lot of them, it's when you're a turtle, you don't, well, a land turtle, you don't migrate, you're not really moving anywhere all that quickly.
yeah.
So you have to kind of stay put when the weather changes, and they just take a big long nap at the bottom of a lake, and they will be underwater for those several months.
And breathe through their butt.
They sure do. They go through brumation, which is
Mm-hmm.
more or less the reptile version of hibernation.
Yeah.
And so their metabolism is way, way, way down. So
Yeah.
they need less oxygen to begin with, and they can get it for a limited time through their butt.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a fun party starting conversation. If you're at a party and you're awkwardly standing in the corner and you want to talk to people, just lead with that fun fact. It's a good one.
Blurt it out nice and loud.
Absolutely. To go with their complex breathing system, they have a very complex circulatory system full of shunts that they can use to block off blood flow to certain parts of their body. Particularly, they can shut off blood flow to their lungs while they are underwater. So they can
Oh.
redirect blood flow to their butt so they can breathe through their butt more efficiently.
Wow.
These shunts also kind of help maintain their body temperature. Like most other reptiles, they are quote-unquote cold-blooded. But when they do get warmed up, they actually have quite a bit of control over their heat. So once they get warmed up, they can stay warmer for quite a long time. So they're not always just the temperature of their surroundings, which is interesting. A lot of smaller, reptiles are not as good at that.
Yeah.
So getting more outside the body, not just around the shell and the internal bits. Their skulls are very strange.
Why?
They have no teeth, which isn't in itself terribly uncommon. Like, birds don't have teeth.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very few, like, there are no snakes with no teeth. I think there are almost no lizards with no teeth. All crocodilians have teeth. So it's, with the reptiles that don't have teeth, it's pretty much just turtles and birds.
Well,
Their skulls are very, very sturdy, very well fused together. They don't have any holes in them, and that will become important in a bit.
do frogs have teeth?
Yes.
Huh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah, so no holes in the skull, including their ear, sort of. They don't have an open and exposed ear like you do. Instead, it is covered by scales.
Whoa,
So even their ears are armored.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then lastly, turtles are usually kind of seen as kind of dumb.
Huh.
Uh, they are not typically depicted as the smartest of animals, but they can actually be trained in some cases, and depending on the training and the species, can retain their training for like 9 years.
Wow.
And that's like, we tested it 9 years ago and haven't tested it since, and it still remembers what to do for that training.
Whoa.
And even though, like I said, they don't migrate a lot, the ones on land, they can use landmarks when traveling long distances. So we're like, oh, I remember that big hill, which I know I'm not great at.
I was gonna say that must be hard for coastal turtles right now, or I guess anywhere that has massive changing, like in construction.
Yeah, I know that's a big thing in like desert tortoises,
Hmm.
because they can remember landmarks, because the big mountainy areas are tend to be where um, more plants are,
Hmm.
because all the mountainy areas are there because it's more resistant to erosion, and so when water, or when it does rain in the desert, um, it runs off it instead of just going into the ground. So at the feet of all these big hills is where there tends to be more uh, accumulated water. So that's where more plants are. So being able to move from hill to hill to hill is really necessary when you live in the desert and it only rains like twice a year.
Yeah.
And then lastly, before we get into some of the more nitty gritty stuff, just some various neat facts about turtles.
Ooh, hit me.
So the parts of the shell are slightly different. The top part along the back is called the carapace, and the part along the stomach is called the plastron. In turtles that have really mobile limbs, things like your sea turtles, which flap through the water with their arms, or things like snapping turtles, which are actually quite mobile on land.
Hmm.
They can pick themselves right up and walk pretty quickly. Their plastron is greatly reduced. So in lots of turtles, the plastron is just like this little T-shaped thing, or like little cross-shaped thing on their stomach.
Hmm.
Whereas in some other turtles, like box turtles, they have a really high domed carapace, and the plastron is slightly hinged. So when they pull their head back into it, they have a muscle that can pull it tight, so not even their head is exposed. They can seal themselves in.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Pretty
box
cool.
turtles are cool. Some have not only reduced plastrons, but also reduced carapace, the one along the back. Things like leatherback sea turtles and some soft shell turtles
Hmm.
have, just, if you look at the skeleton, have great big holes in their back part of the shell, which is potentially to lose weight. In the case of leatherbacks, might also be for a heat thing, because they tend to live in some of the colder ocean climates.
Hmm.
Another strange thing about turtles is that all of them lay eggs.
Why is that strange?
I was going to say that might not sound strange because we think of reptiles laying eggs, but countless groups of snakes and lizards do not lay eggs.
Hmm.
For example, all of the boas give live birth. Things like garter snakes, I believe, give live birth. And tons of lizards do that as well. Um,
Wow.
and it's particularly strange for sea turtles, because in the past, we've had tons of marine reptiles that we are very confident did not lay eggs, that they gave live birth, because being in the ocean, in order to lay an egg and not have it drown, you need to come up on land, which is
Yeah.
why we see sea turtles have to drag themselves up on the beach, because they do not give live birth, they lay eggs.
Right.
And last fun fact, the oldest known turtle, because turtles are known for living a very long time,
Yeah.
his name is Jonathan, the Seychelles giant tortoise. He was hatched sometime in around 1832.
Wow.
So he is, give or take, 190 years old. And in fact, there is a photo of him from 1886. And he is the exact same size that he is today. He was a full-grown adult in the 1880s.
Wow.
And also just a fun fact about Jonathan himself. He's on the back of the 5-pence coin of St. Helena, where he now lives in the South Atlantic.
Aw. It's going to be really detrimental when he dies.
I know, I'm going to be real sad. I went down a very deep Wikipedia rabbit hole about Jonathan. And I highly encourage you all to do the same.
Okay, will do.
All right. So all the fun facts out of the way, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty sciencey stuff. So, there are two main groups of turtles.
Mm-hmm.
One is called the cryptodiers, and the other one is called the pleurodires. So the cryptodiers, which literally means hidden neck, are pretty much all of your turtles. They pull their neck straight back into the shell so that you can see their whole face inside their shell. You can see both their eyes and their mouth. So this includes sea turtles, tortoises, and every turtle in North America, Europe, and Asia.
Wow.
And also still many of them in South America, Africa, and Australia. The other group, the pleurodires, which means side neck turtles, or you'll sometimes hear them called snake neck turtles, pull their neck into their shells sideways.
Whoa.
So you can see just like one side of their face, and also part of their neck.
And what kind of species are those?
So like I said, they're mostly called various things like snake neck turtles. They tend to have much longer
that's
necks.
an actual species?
There's a handful of, like Owen's snake neck turtle, or I don't think that's a real species, but
okay.
So someone's snake neck turtle, as they tend to be, or the Colombian snake neck turtle, or something like that.
Okay. But they're usually
yeah.
Got it.
But yeah, there's only a handful of these species. There used to be a lot more of them, not just because of humans, but they used to be more common in various parts of their fossil history, which we'll talk about.
Cool.
But speaking of turtles in the past, and segueing back to turtles not doing great, you can't talk about turtles without talking about their conservation. So a real quick detour into how turtles are doing, because as we mentioned earlier, not great.
Yeah, not great.
So we've all kind of heard of how plastic straws are bad for sea turtles, but that's by no means the only thing hurting them.
Definitely not.
So among all of the vertebrate orders, only primates are more threatened. And so we had a whole episode about primates, and we talked about how they're also doing real bad. So if turtles only have primates for competition, that is not a good group to be in.
Yeah.
60%, 60, are either threatened, which includes vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered, or already extinct.
Jeez.
60%. And some of the things that, hurt sea turtles, specifically, are things like the ones that eat jellyfish are often fooled by floating plastic in the ocean, which they eat, but then can't poop out. It gets stuck in their stomach. And so the more of it they eat, it just gets stuck. So they eventually just starve to death because they don't feel hungry, so they won't eat anymore, and then they just starve. So it's not just that they choke on the straws, it's much more than that.
That's awful. That kind of reminds me of when I was doing research on the terrapin, that they'll get stuck in crab traps and which you catch crabs in, but they get stuck in there and then they basically drown to death. Oh yeah. It's sad. Just
very sad.
Brutal death.
Yeah. Sea turtles also get caught up in nets meant for fish or other things like crab traps.
Right.
However, other things that you probably don't think about is they can be thrown off of their migration paths by light pollution. So they end up in the
Oh,
wrong spot at the wrong time of year, so they don't even get a chance to reproduce.
dang.
Having their nests on beaches destroyed by human activity, and, as always, the looming specter of climate change. It's
Yep.
just not great. So that's all just sea turtles. For tortoises, which tend to be the most terrestrial of turtles, especially those on islands, are generally larger and slower moving. So when humans first got to those islands, they were like, big, slow, tasty thing. I'm going to kill all of them and eat them.
Yeah.
So, in general, island tortoises doing real bad.
Hmm.
Other places around the world, particularly in Asia, Asian turtles are having a real tough time, particularly for because they're often harvested for food or traditional medicines.
Mm.
And I saw a figure that said 83% of Asian species of turtle are threatened.
Wow.
And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is hosted by 3 white people in North America. I don't want to comment on cultural norms of other places,
Yeah.
but there are ways to get turtles and tortoises sustainably,
Hmm.
and I'll leave it at that.
Very well put.
And then lastly, invasive species outcompeting native ones, particularly what has been called the most successful invasive species in the world.
Oh, can I guess? Can I guess?
Absolutely.
Is it the red-eared slider?
It sure is.
I knew it.
Because they are great at doing what they do. If there is water, they are perfectly happy.
Yep.
Anywhere there is water. Because they eat just about anything. They're omnivorous, and they also can make, pretty good hunters. They'll eat any kind of fish or insect or plant, anything that they can fit in their mouth, they will eat. And they also reproduce very quickly for turtles.
Mhm.
So red-eared sliders are very invasive, usually because they were once pets, and then people realize that they get bigger than the, apple size that they were when you bought them, that they
Yeah.
can be up to like watermelon sized. And people don't want that big turtle in their house that's going to probably outlive them depending on how old they were when they got it.
Yeah.
And then they just sploosh, out it goes into the water.
Yeah.
So, do not release pets into the wild. That
I
is
know.
a... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say when I was doing invasive species work in upstate New York,
Mm-hmm.
the red-eared slider was one of those species that we had to like keep a lookout for at like our boat launches and if we did, like we had to like take them and bring them, I don't know, somewhere. I never did find one, so
Yeah.
that's good. But
Yeah.
they were also like, I guess they got bigger than the native turtles there, and so like they could just outcompete them, I guess.
Yeah.
And so bad boys. They're bad boys.
Yeah. So that is enough sadness for the turtles.
Yeah.
So now let's turn into how turtles got to be turtley. And this is the spot where we would normally talk about the relatives of turtles, what turtles are related to, but we can't really do that.
What? Why?
So the reason that turtles came up in last episode about the Triassic period was because the first turtle-ish ancestors showed up around the Triassic.
Oh, right.
And I had mentioned that we don't really know where turtles came from. And then that prompted you to have the question after we got done recording
Yeah.
of like, what are turtles? What is turtle? And so turtles have been bounced around the reptile family tree ever since we started making evolutionary family trees. We have clues, but really no good answers to what turtles are related to.
Not even with new like genetic stuff.
No, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Okay, cool.
So, a really brief recap into how terrestrial vertebrates, so tetrapods, are organized. So first you have your amphibians, frogs, salamanders, caecilians, off doing their own thing. The ones that lay eggs, also including mammals, because mammals used to lay eggs. So when that first group showed up, they sort of split very quickly into the two main groups that are often talked about. The diapsids, which have 2 holes in their skull, and include all of your modern-day reptiles. So this would be crocodiles and birds, and also lizards and snakes and such. On the other side, we have your synapsids, which only have 1 hole in the skull, and that is, among other things that used to be alive, but today only mammals. So that happened very quickly. However, there's also a third group that's talked about a lot less because they're not around anymore, called the anapsids, which didn't have any holes in their skull. I mentioned earlier that turtles also do not have holes in their skull. So for a really long time, we thought turtles might have been a leftover member of this group.
Okay.
However, we have since realized that turtles used to have those holes in their skull, but they just don't anymore.
Okay.
But that really threw everything off because we're like, okay, so we know that they fit with the rest of the reptiles nice and neatly. But inside of the reptiles, where do they go?
Yeah.
And they have been put next to just about every group of reptiles you can think of. And in general, again, another sort of split within the reptiles, there is the archosaurs, which are your crocodilians, your dinosaurs, your birds, your pterosaurs. On the other side are your lepidosaurs, which are your snakes and lizards and the tuatara. At various points, turtles have been placed next to each and every one of those. They've been placed closer related to birds than crocodilians are. They've been supposedly closely related to crocodilians. Right next to pterosaurs, the flying reptiles of the past. Strange. They've been put next to lizards, tuataras, and outside of all of those groups altogether.
So there's no right answer?
I mean, there is a right answer. We just don't know what it is.
Okay, sure. You haven't found the right answer.
And so, like you asked, and most people would kind of think, wouldn't DNA studies kind of help this? And turtles, I think, are the best example of why DNA studies don't always work the way you would want them to.
Mm-hmm.
So, currently, the sort of growing consensus, if you were to look at only DNA studies, would suggest that turtles are sort of the sister group to dinosaurs and crocodilians. So dinosaurs and crocodilians would be right next to each other, and then outside of that group would be turtles. So basically, turtles are more closely related to dinosaurs and crocs than they are to lizards and snakes.
Okay.
However, that's kind of not always been the case if you were to purely look at the skeletons. And you'll see that a lot in paleontology, is that what the skeleton tells you doesn't always add up with what the DNA tells you. And some reasons that can happen is because genetic studies don't typically take into account rates of evolution.
What do you mean?
So if things evolve very quickly, for example, if they have really short generation times, they can... Because, when the next generation happens, that is when changes and mutations occur.
Okay.
So if you have babies more quickly, you generally have more chances for mutations and changes in the DNA to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have one species that becomes 2, if both are having babies real quick, they can become genetically very different very quickly. However, the opposite is also true, where if it takes a really long time for things to have babies, or they're just naturally sort of resistant to mutations, they evolve very slowly. And so if you have 2 groups that are reasonably closely related, but both evolve very slowly, it can make those two look more closely related than they actually are.
Oh, okay.
So, and it just happens to be the case that both turtles and crocodilians both have really, really slow rates of evolution.
Hmm.
So, whether turtles are actually that closely related to crocodilians or whether that's a part of this potential bias, I don't know. And there are reasonable answers on both sides. So, the like I said, growing consensus is that they are on the archosaur side next to birds and dinosaurs and crocodilians, and not on the more lizardy side.
Okay.
But again,
Oh,
I would not be surprised if that changes in the next 5 years.
yeah. All right. That makes sense.
And unfortunately, oftentimes when the morphology, the skeleton and the DNA don't add up, you go look at the fossils. Because oftentimes that can at least, nudge you one way or the other. However, that's not the case for turtles. Turtles, surprisingly, actually, for how much they've been bounced around the family tree, actually have a really, really good fossil record.
That's great.
Yeah. And it's funny because they actually have a pretty good fossil record because they already encase themselves in a nice, neat little fossilizable package.
True.
They're already in a box made out of minerals, and so when they die, it makes it very easy for them to become fossils.
Very cool.
However, the first turtley things that we have are already quite turtley. So how they became turtley is a little bit of a mystery, but I will share with you what bit of knowledge we do know. The earliest potential turtle relatives, a genus called Eunotosaurus, from the Middle Permian period, about 260 million years ago, has expanded ribs, but not a shell. They're not fused together. And they also have very similar vertebrae to some turtles that are alive today. Otherwise, though, for the rest of the body, it looks like a very squat lizard. So it still has a long tail, still has regular limbs, and for the most part, regular skull.
Uh-huh.
If you saw it, you'd probably be like, that's just a funky looking fat lizard. And this is really tough to know because we obviously only have the bones, but they might have had a similar breathing system to turtles because their ribs don't show the same muscle scars as you would expect if they were breathing with their ribs like a normal vertebrate.
Yeah.
And some studies have also looked at Eunotosaurus and also some of the other similar animals from around this time at why they would do this. Because if this is truly, a turtle ancestor, why they grew their shell is always been kind of a mystery because that is such a strange thing to do.
Yeah.
And so some of the thoughts that people might have had when looking at Eunotosaurus was that this robust rib cage provided like a more stable base for really strong digging muscles.
That is a cool idea.
Yeah. And there's been some thoughts between whether turtles started off as diggers or started off as aquatic, because some of the earliest, like, for real actual turtles are found in aquatic sediments. So it just kind of so happens that traits that generally make you good for digging also generally make you good for swimming.
Right.
So unfortunate, but that's what we got to work with. So that was in the Permian period, and then a big old mass extinction happens, and puts us
Okay.
into the Triassic period. For more on that, see last episode, episode 98. And throughout the Triassic period, we see sort of the patchwork addition of most of the rest of our normal turtle-y features. Losing teeth, shortening tail, closing up those holes in the skull. But it happens a lot like I said, a patchwork, where some of the species have, for example, lost teeth but still have the hole in the skull. Others have closed the hole but still had a longer tail. And some, like the really famous genus Odontocheles, had teeth, still had a longer tail, and still had not fused ribs, but had a full plastron, the belly part of the shell.
That's wild to
That
think
was
about.
that was fully formed, while the rest of it was not. And then people were like, "Well, what would you need that for?
Yeah.
What good is half of a shell,
Especially like the
especially the bottom
underside.
half?"
Right.
Yeah. So, still not entirely sure what that was for. But by the
But
end of the Triassic period, we see the first, mostly true turtle, which is called Proganachilles, and it was about 3 feet long. So at the time, pretty good size for a turtle relative. The only real differences is that it still had a few teeth left, not like on the where you have teeth, but on the roof of the mouth. The rest of the mouth was a normal turtle beak. And they also had a tail club for some reason.
oh,
Yeah, not sure what that was about, but
you know,
basically
as
just
my
a
old
turtle with some. Yeah,
as my old genetics professor would say, it's not survival of the fittest; it's survival of the good enough. And I feel like
exactly.
that's what's happening
That's
here.
yeah. It's like, well, I might as well. If I go into my burrow backwards, I can bite at them and be in my shell. But if I go in frontwards, then they can just grab me by the tail and pull me out. But not if I can smack them.
Yeah.
Maybe that was it. Although, I actually don't know how burrowing Proganachilles was, because there are also quite a lot of like aquatic ones from this time as well.
Yeah.
And despite having this good record of when all these different traits show up in these different turtle-y things, none of these, even like the very earliest ones, like Eunotosaurus, scream, "I'm next to the dinosaurs. I'm next to the crocodilians. I'm next to the lizards." It's just not helpful at all, unfortunately.
Why?
They just don't have any similar features. They're
Oh,
already
okay.
fairly strange
Yeah.
reptiles, or at least not different, not similar enough
Yeah.
to any particular group to be confident.
Right.
And so, like I said, by the end of the Triassic period, turtles are more or less doing their turtle-y thing. And at this point, Pangea was still together. So turtles spread forth across all of Pangea, and then when Pangea split up, became a lot more similar to the diversity of turtles that we see today. And I'm just going to go through quickly as we end off this episode some of my favorite turtles of history,
Oh.
because there are some real losers out there. And here are some of the winners. So, one of the most famous that you will see if you look up, prehistoric turtles or whatever, are a couple of genera called Protostega
Okay.
and Archelon. These two are a pair of fairly closely related sea turtles from the late Cretaceous period, around 90 or so million years ago. And they're weird because they're sea turtles, but they're not at all closely related to the sea turtles that we have today. So both of these groups of sea turtles went back to the water completely independently from one another, which is weird. But you'll also see these two talked about a lot because they are real big.
Yeah. I googled it real quick, and they are very large.
Yeah. Protostega is a bit smaller. But Archelon is the largest turtle we've ever found, and it got to be about 15 feet long.
That's crazy.
So basically a car. And it is very famously found in South Dakota. So basically every museum or anything that I went to when I lived in South Dakota had something about Archelon, which is really cool.
Nice.
Some other big and weird turtles include the genus Carbonemys, which is a side-necked turtle, so one of those rarer kind, from the Paleocene, so not long after all the dinosaurs went extinct, about 60 million years ago, of Colombia. And it was about 5.5 or 6 feet long, so not giant for something in the ocean, but it was a forest turtle.
Okay.
So it lived probably mostly terrestrially and ate leaves and stuff, but it was just a giant side neck turtle that lived on land.
That's cool.
Another side neck turtle from much more recently, the Miocene, so about 13 million years ago, from pretty much the same area of the world, northern South America, is a genus called Stupendemys, which I really enjoy. The people working on prehistoric turtles are really crushing it with their names.
Oh, yeah. These are some good ones.
And so this was similar in size to Carbonemys, but was clearly like an aquatic turtle. So this was just a 6 foot long red ear slider.
Love that.
Yeah. Although, like I said, this was also a side neck turtle, so not one of our standard turtles. But lastly, my favorite.
Oh, you saved the best for last.
I sure did. So this is a genus called Ningemys.
Awesome name.
It is a member of a very weird group of turtles or turtle-like things called the Myolaniids. And so they are maybe true turtles, but not quite. So they're very turtley. If you saw it, you'd call it a turtle. But they have spikes all over. So like they have these spikes coming off their skulls. They have spikes coming off sort of the fringes of the shell. So not like Bowser where they have, spikes coming off the back. But they also had a club tail bigger than what we talked about earlier. And so that's one reason I like them, is because they just look neat. But also the name is very fun.
Yeah.
So
it's giving ninja.
It sure is. So oftentimes when you name a new genus or species, you give a reason for why you named it the way you did. Sometimes scientists take the easy way out and just don't, or come up with some other excuse. But the people who named Ningemys did not take the easy way out. They did not hide from the world. Instead, they gave it the suffix emys, which means turtle, and the prefix ninj or ninja. And to quote from the paper, they named it Ninja, an allusion to that totally rad, fearsome foursome epitomizing shelled success.
I love that.
So, they named it after the Ninja Turtles, which I think is wonderful, even though the Ninja Turtles are likely responsible for red-eared sliders being so popular.
Yeah.
So, at least we got to have a little fun with the Ninja Turtles in this episode.
Right.
So, like I said, one last thing that I like about these guys is that this is also just a really strange group of turtles that, even though they're real weird, they lasted right up until the first ever humans arrived to Australia and the surrounding islands and stuff. So it's hypothesized that humans might have been a factor in them going extinct.
Okay.
So
Were there other
some of the
factors?
most recent ones. What's that?
Were there other factors that they hypothesized?
I mean, around that time, lots of big stuff was just going extinct, and these were not
Right.
at all small. They weren't giant by any means, but they were pretty big. So in the late Pleistocene, most large animals went extinct. This when
Okay.
things like your woolly mammoths and your giant ground sloths and stuff like that went extinct. And so Australia wasn't immune to that. They had lots of big marsupials that went extinct, but also quite a lot of big reptiles that went extinct too. But we found fossils that suggest that some of the last ones, not quite Ninjames itself, but some of its relatives, went extinct as recently as 3,000 years ago.
Whoa. That's pretty close.
So real recent.
Yeah.
So I just like the thought of the first like native Australian folks getting there and being like, what is this?
Yeah.
But
Very cool.
that wraps up our turtle talk. And hopefully now you have a better appreciation for our little shelled friends.
I definitely do. Thanks, Gavin.
Absolutely. So make sure to check out next episode for our big episode 100 extravaganza. We'll have a couple announcements coming then as well about some various changes and things coming to the podcast, but we will cross that bridge next episode when we come to it. So for episode 99 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive, I have been Gavin, that has been Fia, and we will see you all next week.
Bye.
This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Gavin Davidson and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Finella Campanino. It was sound edited and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.